Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about my experience with depression. I was a pretty depressed kid. I never really had a good sense of self. My parents they did the best they could, but they had their own issues to where they couldn't really be there emotionally in the way that I needed them to be. So it almost shaped my reality in a sense of um, I must not be worthy of their time, their attention, their money to be. I remember wanting to do these activities and do things creatively, but they never really had the money or the means to take me. So um, I I just stopped. I remember stopping asking them for things because I knew it was never going to come. So I felt like I was in a prison. I felt very encapsulated in my household. I didn't feel like I could thrive. And I remember once middle school and high school came along, I started to really emphasize my social life and my friendships. I think that was my escape, was living vicariously through them, because I remember having friends where their parents would take them out to eat and take them around, and their life seemed so fun and um, joyful. So any chance I could get out of the house and be with other people, I would. I think that was my escape. And so I just didn't feel like my house was ever a home. So I think that in turn, I took that with me throughout my all of my adolescence up into late teens and early 20s. And I think those were my escapes in school. But when I was at home, I was not happy. I was very depressed. And once I got out of high school and stopped hanging out with my friends, I remember feeling very lost and not knowing who I even was. I felt like my social life really defined who I was growing up in school, but I was on my own now and I had no sense of self. I had no identity. I knew I was creative. I was always a creative person, but I was very prone to escapism. I never really sat with what issues I was running from. Um, and then I met a very toxic man when I was 19, and I was in a relationship with him for 5 years. And when whatever self-esteem and self-confidence that I did have was went to shit when I met him, because that few years I was in that relationship, he was just very controlling, jealous. He definitely took away any kind of self-esteem and confidence that I did have. It got whittled away so down that I got to such a depressed place where, but he was paying all the bills and he was taking care of me, that I, and I wasn't living in the same city that my mom, or, we were stationed in different places. He was in the army. So I felt very helpless. I never defined who I was as a person. So I followed in the footsteps of the old school generations, where you just become somebody's wife and you become the homemaker. They take care of you. So I did live an old school fashioned mentality for a few years, but I snapped out of it when I realized how unhappy I was after a few years. And I remember being in my worst days. I remember being in bed and just blacking out all the windows and not wanting to leave the house. And I was like, this isn't right. Why am I like this? And then that's when I started to question, maybe I'm like this because I don't have a purpose. And then I started questioning more. So I started becoming self-aware. And when I started to question my reality and my thoughts and my beliefs, and it all really started with when my mom gave me a book. It was a few years. It was a couple years into that toxic relationship. It was the Secret, the Law of Attraction. And once I read that book, I was absolutely blown away that this was even a possibility, that your thoughts can create your reality. And so I pondered that thought, and it really opened my mind to the possibilities of the future. So if it wasn't for that book, I would probably be stuck in that toxic relationship still. But once I started questioning what why I was the way I was, I got back to the core of my childhood and how I felt so constricted and helpless, and I had to stay that way just because that's the way it was. And once I realized that I could create my own reality, and I could change my life, it didn't happen overnight, but I did a couple of YouTube searches, and I remember listening to a motivational video that basically said, you are here for a reason. You might be in a shit situation, you might be depressed, you might feel like you're stuck and you can't move forward and your life's always going to be like this, but believe me, this isn't the way. This will not be your life forever. You have the power to change your life, and it might not happen overnight, but you have to take some action steps. And if the second one, okay, so that's the first point. You start to question your reality, you start to question your upbringing, you start to question, those are not my beliefs, those beliefs were instilled in me by my parents. I remember being a creative kid, but it was shut down so much that I just completely neglected it after a point. And so I started to get back in touch with my inner child, and I started to stand firm with what I do like, what I don't like. I stopped allowing other people's influences to invade my opinions, my decisions. And it does, like I said, it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight. I've been working on this for a few years now. So I've come to a point where I've really learned to not be around negative people. I'm very selective of who I hang out with now. I don't open up to just anybody, even though I always am kind to people. I'm very protective of my energy. But so you start to question, why am I like this? What caused me to think such self worthlessness of myself? And then I finally came to a point of accepting the situation. I was no longer in denial. I was finally accepting of the fact that, you know what, I just want to lay in bed for 2 fucking days. And I don't care if that, if I come across as, a lazy person that's unappreciative of life. That's just where I needed to be at the time. So I allowed myself to have those low moments, but I ultimately always made it a point to, okay, you had your time in bed, you had your time to wallow and to be low, but at least get a nice outfit on and step out and grab some coffee, even if it's 20-30 minutes. And then if you want to come back home into that space, that's perfectly fine. But I think that's when I started to switch the way that my mind was seeing things, because I know that your brain has the potential to, it actually can create new neural pathways. It's not a question anymore. They have science backing this. And so it's baby steps, and the more you step out and the more you do little things, the more you can expand on that. And then I realized that I had some really positive friends, so I started to reach out to people that were willing and open, even communities online, people that are just willing to hear you out. I remember just starting to write and journal and talk to people, connect with higher minded people that were on a different frequency and a higher vibrational set point, and they helped to get all of this crap off my chest. And I remember having a couple hour-long conversations here and there with these supportive friends, and feeling like such a weight was lifted off my shoulders, even though I did go back to the low point eventually, that baseline set point that I had established for so long. It was the moments of pulling myself out, and they eventually got stronger and stronger. I started accepting invitations to do things. I started to see myself in a different light in the mirror, even though I was very unhappy with my self-image and didn't have any self-confidence. I started to see myself as a sovereign being and a human with a purpose on this earth. and it was stripped from me. It was taken from me, from my parents. They didn't instill the positive self-beliefs that a child should. But I started to reparent myself and started to talk to myself with better language, more positive, uplifting words. And even though those were also moments, just very fleeting moments, I kept adding on and adding on to the point where my full day wasn't just darkness. It was still depression, but I had little increments of positivity and movement towards a happier, a more fulfilling future. And what I realized went hand in hand so well was the more I got to know myself as a person, the more I stood firm and I like this, I don't like that. I want to watch that movie. I don't like that color on me. I feel like cooking just because I feel like trying a new dish. I want to try that restaurant. The more I stood firm in knowing what I wanted, even if it felt fake, like the more I felt grounded, the more I felt like this is my life, the more I felt in charge of my life. So, for example, I drove by a cute little cafe the other day, and I would have never, I just kind of drive by, but something within me said, just go try that, just to enjoy it, just for the joy of living, just for the sheer joy of whether you're going to like their menu or not. And the more I accept and take ownership of the fact that I have the choice to do what I want in this life is so empowering to me. And I used to feel so powerless. So that's the difference. So when you realize I have the power to get up and go grab a coffee, take a stroll around, the shopping center, or appreciate the birds outside singing, the beautiful nature around us, and just you have the choice. So it doesn't start off that easy. It feels very fake at first, but I think the more you do it, the more you practice it, and the more you realize that those beliefs telling you that that you're not worthy were never your beliefs to begin with, and you start to re-own those wounded childhood aspects of yourself, the more you start to integrate those broken pieces. And it's like a puzzle piece. It's all these little puzzle pieces just start to collect over time, and they start to rebuild you into this beautiful masterpiece that you are, And so allowing yourself to be with the darkness is very important too. I feel like resisting it only causes more damage. The resistance of anything is never a positive thing. I feel like if you get to a point where you are just like, okay, this is what it is, I'm depressed, I might be like this forever, but I'm going to try to make a change. Even in that trying, you have power over your life. Even in that moment of that decision of, I'm going to, do the dishes today. So what if that's the only productive thing I do? I'll jump back in bed and go to sleep, and, I'll just watch some more, videos or whatever, and not do anything else. Even washing the dishes, that's a choice, and you owned your power again. In those little moments, I think they start to build up over time. And once you start to realize, oh yeah, I smiled at a stranger today, somebody held the door open for me. Like, once you start to be grateful for all the little things, that's when you start to really live again. Gratitude is huge. I know it's so cheesy, like, oh, be grateful, be grateful. It's just a lot of the spiritual lingo that's thrown around nowadays is kind of meaningless at this point. But I wish there was just a better way. This is just my experience, and this is just my story I'm sharing to give you a different perspective of, I was depressed for a few years. This is not something that happened overnight. I've been working on asserting myself and re-owning myself and my power in my life for a few years now. This isn't something that just happened overnight. So I'm hoping that for you, it is faster. I think I stalled a lot. I do have a tendency to distract myself and, overspend, or escapism is a huge thing that I do. I try to, binge watch. I don't like to face reality sometimes, but I'm working on that. And so, and then, yeah, so those are the main things that I think really have helped me in the last few years, is just taking those small steps and sitting with that gratitude too. I feel like the words at this point are not as powerful as the actual feeling and connection to that higher self, or that more integrated whole that we all essentially are. I think we were just raised in a society that was just meant to almost break us down and keep us there and be consumers. And you're not happy until you look like this. You're not happy until you own this, this new iPhone. And who do you think you are for not having ear pods? Like, it's like such a facade. It's so ridiculous. Materialistic things come and go. I still have an iPhone 8. Like, freaking sue me. If I could have stuck with the iPhone 6 or 7, I would have. I really didn't care, but I broke it. So, I don't care as much about materialistic things. And I don't think I'm better than anyone for that, but I've just retrained my mind to appreciate the things that really matter. What, values do you have? Are you a good person? Do you want to share that with other people? Because I know when a stranger smiles at me, like at a gas station, or, it's nice to be friendly. It's nice to spread love. It feels good to help an old lady, if she needs the door held open. It feels good. I feel fulfilled when I help people, and I like to be an example of that in the world. I don't like to be a typical, and if I'm in a bad mood, sometimes I am. Nobody's perfect, but I think it's just those little action steps and being grateful and journaling, reaching out to communities online. And if you had a positive influence in your life and you lost touch with them, get back in touch with them. Let it out. Don't let it in, because the more you let those aspects of yourself within, the more it causes turmoil. Those feelings, those emotions, those traumas, they want to be felt and let go. And emotions are like waves in the ocean. They just come and go. And the more you resist it, the more it's going to just sit there. And it might go away for a while, but it's going to come back and you're going to resist it again. So personally, the thing that I think has helped me massively is to really just sit with that intense emotion. It's not easy, it's hard, but I've found that it doesn't last for more than 30 seconds to a minute. If you're aware and you're aware that it's going to pass, and you really make an intention to let it go, you can sit with it, and then you'll notice it dissipate and start to dissolve. It's pretty powerful. I would read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. It really brings things into perspective. It's kind of a hard read. I couldn't even read that book at first. I opened the book, got to the 4th or 5th page, and I set it down, and I didn't reopen it until 2 years later. So I was that depressed that none of the words resonated. I was like, okay, I understand what he's saying, but this isn't doing shit for me, and whatever. So I went back to my, depressed state or whatever I was doing at the time. But I just know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and coming from a place that I was so in such darkness, there's hope. There's definitely hope. There's just different tools that are helpful, and I think allowing yourself to be where you're at is probably a good first step, and starting to question whether or not those beliefs running your mind are your beliefs in the first place. You know, I was worthy of I was worthy of everything I wanted as a child. My parents just didn't have the means to give that to me, but those beliefs stuck with me for so long. So it's just a matter of reprogramming your mind and starting to see things in a different lens. So I hope that helps a little bit. It's hard, but it's a journey. It's a journey, and keep going. Keep it moving. Keep going. Journal. Let it out. Don't hold it in.